We thought we'd do a little media avail on the front end, if that's okay, and then I want to really express my appreciation for Mayor Boshinsky hosting us and the RIC committee, and also Lieutenant Governor coming over, and we'll get some comments from him here after Kevin and I've kind of gone through a briefing of how this is going to work. Before I start, though, I do want to express again my concern about what's going on in Afghanistan, and I want to express my condolences and my appreciation on behalf of myself and of course all of us here in North Dakota and across the country for our service members who have been killed and wounded, and our concern and appreciation, our heartfelt sympathy to them and to their families. And again, we want to say thank you to all of those who have served and are serving, and particularly in Afghanistan now, and thank them for what they're doing. And it again brings home how important it is that we give them the support they need to do their mission. They need the support to do their mission. The commanders on the ground need the ability to make the necessary decisions. Of course, we want Americans brought out safely, all Americans, and we want our Afghani allies to be brought out safely. And we need to take the time to do that effectively and well. And we also need to see from the administration the plan going forward in terms of what about our equipment? So in addition to our personnel, what about the equipment that's still there? What is the plan to make sure that equipment is not used against us by the Taliban or other terrorist organizations? And what is the plan going forward so that we have the intelligence we need so that we can counteract terrorist groups in Afghanistan? The war on terror is not over. It continues. And we have to keep not only Americans safe here at home and abroad, but work with our allies as well. So all of those things need to be done. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about ISR today, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance specifically as far as how the Air Force does it, and the major role that the Grand Forks Air Force Base plays and will continue to play in that ISR mission. That's what we're talking about today. That's a big part of what I'm talking about, what Kevin will be talking about, as far as the intelligence gathering in places like Afghanistan, as well as taking the fight to the enemy when we need to. Our Guards actively doing that year-round right now in the Reaper mission. But that intelligence gathering can't be done just from satellites or just from aviation assets, all of which Grand Forks is a part of and will continue to be. But the feet on the ground matter in that effort as well. So all those things are going to have to be addressed. And so do you want to touch on that before we
Yeah, maybe I will, John. Thanks. I think that's appropriate. And I, like Senator Hoeven, first of all, express my gratitude to the men and women of our military, their families, and the support who have been involved in the war on terror for now 20 years. And hearts break, my heart breaks. I continue to pray for, find myself this morning especially, praying for those that remain, that somehow we can get all of them out. And we need to do everything that we can as fast as we can. John and I, like our colleagues, are committed to providing whatever resources are necessary for a successful withdrawal going forward. And we'll see how it all plays out. John and I will be participating in a briefing tomorrow. We've been about every other day or so being briefed by the leadership on the issues and the circumstances on the ground in Afghanistan. I'm sure John's office, like mine, and every one of our colleagues are receiving dozens to hundreds of phone calls from North Dakotans, veterans, people who either have friends, family, colleagues that are still in Afghanistan trying to get out. And our offices are working together to avoid duplication and to make sure we can work as efficiently as we can to help our own. I might just say, I know there's a lot of temptation out there right now to try to score political points, and this is not the day to do that. This is a day when we have to commit ourselves as Americans to to what's happening minute by minute, hour by hour, to provide all of the support that we can in Afghanistan to the men and women of the State Department, the intelligence agencies, and certainly our military men and women as they continue to be in harm's way, and that, frankly, it's getting to be more and more challenging. So, with that, we have to answer some questions about later, perhaps. But first and foremost, our thoughts and prayers are with those who are still there and who are suffering.
Exactly right. Thanks for coming out today. We'd like to do a little media brief on what we're going to be discussing here at the roundtable. So thanks to all of you for coming. Right now, Air Force is putting out a statement that's entitled Grand Forks Air Force Base to lead future ISR missions. And essentially what it says is that the Grand Forks Air Force Base will be one of the Air Force's premier locations for Air Force intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions for years to come. And this is announcements, the culmination of years worth of work, certainly by Senator Cramer, Kelly Armstrong, Congressman Armstrong, myself, your BRIC committee, your mayor, so many others. I mean, at one point we were down to fumes, and now I think as we're going to show you, particularly with these charts, we're getting to the point where we're pursuing not just a mission, but multiple missions that actually all integrate with each other in a very effective way, but that are very important, and not just good from the standpoint of here in Grand Forks in North Dakota, but really an integral part of where Air Force and Space Force, really armed services, are going, because our reach will be truly global and reach across all of the services. We're very pleased and appreciative that Air Force is making a public commitment today in their press statement to the Grand Forks Air Force Base for a major role in the Air Force's ISR mission, both now and for the future. And since there's a lot to it, let's start out with where we are now and then where we're going. So right now we're the headquarters for the 319th Aerial Reconnaissance Wing. And the 319th, of course, has the Block 40 mission, which is here at Grand Forks Air Force Base, and will continue to be here at located here at Grand Forks Air Force Base. And we continue to augment the Block 40 aircraft, and something that Air Force is going to continue to use going forward. Also, right now we have what's called a geographically separated unit. So the 319th is the headquarters, and it's a wing status base. Being a wing status base is very important, because that means we not only have our wing here and so forth, but we have other bases that come under our wing. So that expands, the role of our base as a headquarters in this ISR mission. So right now we have the Block 30 aircraft at Beale Air Force Base in California, and then we're slated to stand up another geographically separated unit at Robbins Air Force Base in Georgia, which is the E-11 manned aircraft. So that's where we are right now. Now that's going to shift. You're going to see, and that's why the timing matters here, because we've been working with Air Force, as I said, for quite a while, but particularly now they want to make a shift in terms of their ISR assets, and that involves a number of changes which they need funding to be able to do. It's about $2.2 billion that they want to invest in these new ISR missions, which we're agreeable to, which we've agreed to on the basis that Grand Forks is going to be a big part of it. And so that's really what today's announcement is all about, in terms of Grand Forks being a big player, in the future of ISR for the Air Force. So first, they will keep the 319th as a full ISR reconnaissance wing at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. Second, they will continue to operate the Block 40 aircraft here out of Grand Forks Air Force Base, and will continue to work on upgrades to that system. Also, as I say, in 22, or beginning in 22, the E-11 manned aircraft mission, which is the Battlefield Airborne Command mission at Robbins Air Force Base, will come under the 319th. We're the headquarters unit for that mission as well. The unit at Beale, the Block 30, will be replaced. In other words, they're going to transition away from the Block 30 aircraft and use that funding, like I say, along with JSTARS, another system they're transitioning away from, because they're going into the E-11. That frees up about $2.2 billion that they're going to put into future ISR mission, which not only will be part of what we do in the future, but also will have another base that will come under us with similar ISR missions. And then they've agreed to, they're doing the planning in 22, but they'll actually start construction here in 23 for the future ISR mission. That construction is slated to start here, construction and renovation of our facilities. That is to start in 23 and be done by 26. And if you look at their press release, which we're providing to all of you, the way they put it, the construction and renovations will enable the 319th Reconnaissance Wing to develop and train crews in support of future ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance missions. And so that's very important, because even though we're keeping the Block 40s, it was important to us that as they transition from the 30s to new stuff, that there's no gap. And that's why they have to start with construction here in Grand Forks in 23. The Block 20s, which we agreed to let go last year, although they kept them, they kept using them, they found that they needed them. Yeah. We may see some of that with the 30s, yeah. But now they've also agreed that with the 20s, Air Force has also agreed that with the 20s and the 30s, they will allow other uses for those throughout OSD, Office of Defense. And so that's very important to Grand Sky. And so we'll be talking more to you, I think, in the not too distant future about some things then that we'll develop for Grand Sky that relate to the Block 20s and the Block 30s, and some of the other new things that we're working on related to hypersonics and those kind of things. But that's not for today, that's for another day. And so I kind of want to just show you on these two graphs before I let Kevin jump in here and continue the briefing. I think the simplest way to do it is, so this just kind of shows you the components of our role in ISR. And that is the E-11, that's the manned aircraft at Robins will report to us. And we'll have the Block 40s here. We start building facilities in 23 for crew training to develop and stand up a new mission. And then we will be the headquarters for another base with new mission as well. So that's the components of the ISR mission, but I think you really have to look at Grand Forks now as kind of the hub of the wheel, and then we've got now 5 different spokes that we're developing. And if you remember, one time we were running on fumes, we barely had one mission, and now we have actually 5 different core businesses, if you will, revolving around the hub of the Grand Forks Air Force Base. It's the ISR mission that I just got done talking about, but then we also have the low Earth orbit satellite mission. Now that's a communications mission that we're going to have along with Redstone, which is a base down in Huntsville, Alabama. Our 2 bases are working with the Space Development Agency. A lot of great work by Kevin in that regard, and a little funding that goes with it as well. And so
it seems to matter all the time.
It does seem to matter. So those 2 bases will work on communications with those low Earth orbit satellites, and Space Development Agency is starting to put those satellites up there right now. And that's not only the regular communication. Now that we're actually with Grand Sky developing the laser communication and General Atomics to communicate with lasers from ground to satellite, satellite to satellite, and satellite to ISR. This stuff all ties together. And that's global reach. This is how they're going to communicate with these satellites for all of our armed services around the globe, right? Because they operate in an integrated way now. So that'd be the second spoke on the wheel, would be the LEO mission along with the ISR mission. Of course, all this ties back into Grand Sky, and some of the things we're doing here, you will see will come back to Grand Sky. And like I said, that'll, I think, be our next briefing when we're ready to go. And of course, it ties in with the incredible partnerships we have as a result of the Northern Plains test site. And the LT is here, And he could talk a little bit on that for just a minute, but obviously there's no partnership in the UAS world, reaching out to UND and Odegaard School and everything else. Nobody's got a partnership like we do in terms of the UAS test site. And then Customs and Border Protection. We have responsibility for 900 miles of border out of Grand Forks. That's a big chunk. And that involves a lot of these same kind of assets and a lot of the same kind of technology that goes into all these other missions, and think how important the whole border protection issue is right now. Okay, your turn.
Okay, maybe just a couple of things. First of all, John's modest. And I love that he started with where we are, but every now and then it's, I think, instructive to look at where we came from. He talked about being on fumes a couple of times. The Block 40s, make no mistake, Bruce, am I exaggerating when I say the Block 40s are here because John Hoeven made sure they were still here. And by the way, that wasn't just for the Chamber of Commerce in Grand Forks. As he said a little bit ago, suddenly Block 30s look more important than they did last week. And so I will spare you the historical lessons, but I cannot tell you how many times I've had combatant commanders in front of me. In fact, I think we should put a video collage together and I've asked them, how important is ISR to you, and especially Central Command, especially Central. And so eyes in the sky is a really big deal. And I just have to say, as I look at the leadership around the room, I mean, Colonel Curry, General Armagost, President Armagost, Mayor Boshinsky. This is not an accident, folks. If you never believed in divine intervention before, you ought to look at this leadership team and look what's going on today and realize that this is what's happening today, and what the Air Force is announcing today is really a testament to the leadership in this community at this base. The legacy of the base has positioned the base for the future. And that's why the Air Force is making this commitment today. The Block 40 mission, of course, that's high altitude, high frequency communications. That's what they do better than anybody. That's what positions them for future ISR missions. John, again, being modest, said we've been working with the Air Force. We have. We've been working with them to make sure that they didn't divest themselves too soon of assets that are important in the fight. But at the same time, we're with them in helping them divest those assets at a time and in a way that helps save the money for future warfighting. So as we witness what's going on today, and when I say today, I mean literally today, in Afghanistan, we know that the war on terror is not over. We don't get to unilaterally declare the end of a war with terrorists. But there are other threats that are looming. Obviously, our near-peer adversaries, China, Russia. We talk a lot about great power competition. We have to be prepared for that as well. In fact, what we have to do is deter that. And so the future ISR missions are designed for those types of adversaries as well as a current adversary. So it's been an absolute honor for the last 2.5 years to work with John Hoeven as the seasoned appropriator that he is, serving on the Armed Services Committee and being able to get text messages from the BRICS saying, ask this general about ISR, ask that general about ISR, and just keep building that record of why this communication is so critical. And I don't think you have to do a lot of convincing necessarily, but it doesn't hurt to remind them on a regular basis. So we're just glad to be, I'm glad to be on the team. I'm glad to be in Grand Forks, and we're grateful to be able to provide some of that long-term certainty that a community like Grand Forks likes to have, obviously, when they consider the future of their base. And I will tell you, Mr. Mayor, and I know the members of the BRIC know this, they spend a lot of time working on it. When it comes to the relationship between the Air Force and a community, I honestly never hear anything from the Air Force except great things about the way they're treated here. And that's not true in every community that the Air Force has a base. It's true in the 2 communities in North Dakota, but it's not true everywhere. It makes a big difference. So congratulations to all of you. Thanks to all of you for being on the team with us.
Absolutely. Kevin, thanks. And it is really, one of the things Kevin did when he came to the Senate is he got on armed services, and his other committee assignments too all dovetail with mine, but for him to think that through was really a smart move. So he's on the armed service on the authorizing side, I'm on defense appropriates on the funding side, and so that's really helpful. And so thanks for doing that and being smart enough and tuned in enough to do that. That's a big thing that a lot of people wouldn't maybe have done. And then the other thing is, you know, I want to make sure I give Kevin credit, and he deserves a lot of credit here, for he's always thinking about, well, maybe we could do this or maybe we could do that, and he networks so well. So when it came time for Space Development Agency to do this LEO mission, you know, he goes somehow and noses out Derek Tenier. Well, that was brilliant, because Derek Tenier is one of these guys that wants to do stuff. So we're helping him do stuff, really good stuff. And of course, a lot of it's going to be here. So when it comes to figuring things out and you know, and talking about how we can maybe get some of these things done, Senator Cramer has been just remarkable, and I want to thank you for it. Thank you. And LT, do you want to say anything before we ask for if there's a question or two? And then we're going to go over and just do the roundtable. You guys, you know, you can stay or do whatever you want to do. But we're just going to go through it, get input from everybody. And like Kevin, I want to thank Boshinsky, who you know, is doing a heck of a job as mayor on the and the BRIC, all the members of the BRIC. Talk about a great creative group, and of course, General Armacost, thank you for incredible leadership and everything that UND brings to the table and will bring to the table. Pretty excited, sir. LT, anything before we take a question or two?
Sure, a couple things. I tell you what, for not knowing what this was before I showed up, pretty exciting. It's not that I'm not schooled up on the need, because Grand Forks has the best advocacy of anyone. And I want to commend President Armacost, Mayor Boshinsky. He took over during COVID. I mean, it's tough times, and you've been great leaders. But these leaders that have been here before have a vision. The county commissioners with Grand Sky. Tom is on Task Force Mines. That's another board, not only the Northern Plains UAS test site that I get the blessing of chairing, but I also get to chair Task Force Mine, which is Task Force Military in North Dakota. And one of the things we're trying to do there is make sure that our laws dictate and show how important it is and how to us of how military friendly we are, but we need, our laws need to reflect that. And so there's a scorecard that was out there at the Pentagon that we didn't really realize we were showing 4 out of 10 as a state. And our base commanders would say that doesn't make a lot of sense, because there's places that we and our personnel are not treated friendly and respectful. And in North Dakota, that's how it is. That's why people choose to retire here. We're treated respectfully and very valued by the community. So Task Force Mine, we're shooting for 10 out of 10, and it's changing things like military spouse occupational licensing. You know, all these little issues that we think are not that big a deal. If you're transferring from another state, these are a big deal. So the UAS test site, Vantis deploying beyond visual line of sight, Grand Sky, Grand Forks was the leader, and then now we're doing it in the Bakken. Next, we're moving south, hopefully around Grand Farm. I mean, these are things that happen because of UND Aerospace, because of the vision that was there before, because of Grand Forks Air Force Base, Grand Sky, with the UAS activity there, with private investment. Legislature putting in money. This is second to none. There's nothing like this in the country, but some points that I circled from what they're saying. Future. This is an announcement of not reducing. This is the 319th. It's going to be in support of future intelligence ISR. Will remain central to the Air Force core ISR mission in the future. And I tell you what, if they're constructing and renovating from 23 to 26, that's not a shutdown. That's not reducing. That is increasing. So Senator Hoeven mentioned this is growth. This is bringing command of 2 other Air Force bases under Grand Forks Air Force Base. This is a great day. And thank you to both the men on my left and right for leading the way through it. It's incredible. But it also kudos to Grand Forks and the Air Force Base personnel. So thank you all. It's a great day for Grand Forks.
Right on. Question or two?
Two-part question for you guys. One, you know, we've all have followed this for some years, going back to the 80s, saw the B-52s leave, saw the missiles leave, saw the tankers leave, right? And then you kind of get a new shiny object and we're happy. You know, there's been a lot of bad, but I want you to explain, sort of for a 5th grade level explanation of ISR, how that is like the mission that all these other things fall underneath, and just by ISR being here, that, you know, that means great things for not 5 years, 10 years, or till the next battle, but for decades. And then second of all, how much of this ISR footing, the war footing you talked about, Kevin, is related to China? And the threat that Mike Pompeo said recently in North Dakota was our biggest national security threat.
Yeah, well, your question actually shows a good knowledge of what's going on. ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. And then when you combine that with a LEO mission, now you've got command and control. So between these two, it's finding out what's going on, surveilling what's going on, and then organizing your command and control so all of your different armed services can respond. And remember, that includes not only armed services, but then all of our covert operations as well. That's one of the challenges we have in talking about ISR. For example, the North Dakota Air National Guard is in the fight every day. And I mean every day, if you get what the point I'm making right now. And so they're part of this where we're operating all the time, but we can't sit and tell you, okay, this was the mission they accomplished today, because it's the nature of the ISR world. So understand with ISR world, you've got everything from, well, we'll start at the top, satellites to aircraft, manned and unmanned, to all different types of communications, technologies, cyber, and all of these things fitting together. And it's not just Air Force, it's not just Space Force, it's all of the other armed services and our covert operations, which is why you see it makes so much sense that we're tying these things together here. And just, you know, a few short weeks ago at Cape Canaveral, they were putting up satellites that we're going to communicate with out of this location. So that's the ISR piece. The second piece is, you can, from what's going on in Afghanistan, you can see we still have, you know, to deal with the war on terror in a very disparate, dispersed way, right? But a big part of the focus in the armed services, for our military now, is just what you said, near-peer competition. We have to be able to deal with Russia and China in terms of our technology and be ahead of them so that they can't defeat any of our systems, be they on the ground, in the air, or anywhere in the world. So that means our ISR technologies, like, say, a Block 20 or a Block 30, that's older technology, even though it's very modern, it's older technology. The stuff we're moving to has to have a lot of other things that enable us to deal with Russia and China. And I'd love to go into more specifics, but we really can't. So it's new missions, new technologies. But we have to look not just at places like the Middle East or Afghanistan or something like that. We have to look at near peers, you know, our adversaries like Russia and China, and be able to deal with them.
Scott, I think I just add a little bit to that, because John did a great job of describing it, but you know, our Global Hawks have been fairly vulnerable to less sophisticated adversaries. Now remember, Global Hawks are high altitude, and then they manage a high frequency. We have two, I think the Air Force has two high frequency communication systems. Global Hawk facilitates one of them. So their eyes in the sky, as John said, ISR, I won't go through all that again. But even at that, the older machines are somewhat vulnerable. They fly for a long time. That's one of the great assets they bring. But as we go to future, to near peer competition, John's exactly right. They need to be better, more stealth, faster, whatever the case might be. So, you know, as the technology advances, we want to be positioned for the future. What's positioned Ground Force for the future is the legacy that they created and are creating every single day.
I mean, we're moving to new technologies that, like, as Kevin said, whether it's stealth or hypersonics or all these things, and we're part of it.
When you say Block 40, I think a lot of people don't understand it.
Yeah.
But basically, we now have Global Hawk, and what we're talking about in the future is new, improved surveillance aircraft, unmanned aircraft, and all those systems that tie to it, and would be based out of Grand Forks.
We will be part of new ISR missions. And that's the best description we can give you right now. as we go forward, obviously, you'll continue to see it evolve. I mean, we're gonna start construction around here in '23. So there'll be more and more detail as it continues to evolve and develop, but for today, it's future ISR missions, and you understand what they're doing. It's all these things together. It's not gonna be any one thing, you know?
I think it's important, without revealing anything futuristic, for example, we've talked about the E-11 at Robins Air Force Base. I think there are 3 of them now. We had one more, but we lost one of those. I think there's gonna be a total of several more that'll come under this wing. They're manned. They're not unmanned. They're manned aircraft that carry the Bacon. That's battlefield airborne command node. So Bacon started on the Global Hawk. The Global Hawk started with the Bacon communications system. And what this does is it ties all kinds of other systems together. And John's already explained
And people.
how that works. Yes.
Think about it, and people. You know, at the end of the day, we love having really smart, amazing, high-tech people here that can synthesize information and be part of command and control and evaluate intelligence. So, I mean, don't leave the people element. That's really important. But you can't just talk about systems. You gotta focus on the people that are required to do this really sophisticated, good stuff.
And it's
So it's
joint,
a lot of
it's
things.
joint force. It's not just Air Force.
You notice they went right to training, because right away they're talking about people and the importance of people in this whole endeavor.
Block 40 is going to continue, E11 is going to come, it's going to keep Grand Forks Air Force Base through the end of the decade, and what kind of population growth can we expect to see at the Air Force Base because of this?
I don't have specific numbers, but it'll be growth. Okay?
One last question. I mentioned previously there's been losses for the Grand Forks Air Force Base over the decades. Have we ever had an armed services member and a military approach?
No.
We've never had an armed services member in our history in either of those.
How important is that to what you've just announced here today?
I think it's really important. I think it's really important.
Here's the thing, Scott. Obviously, in the post-BRAC world, the base realignment enclosure world, politics, and prior to it, but in the post one, people have seen now what it looks like to lose your military base. So that's why you have such active community organizations, and why the chambers of commerce get involved, and why you see this strong advocacy for individual bases. One of the things I've appreciated, about 2 months ago, Mayor, I'll never forget, we were sitting in this building, it was June 28th, as a matter of fact, and he was conducting one of his meetings, and we just happened to be in town. It was actually for the change of command. That day, was that June 28th, Colonel? It was. Okay, so that morning, and they have very early morning meetings, I noticed, and so I just sat in on it. And the one thing I'll never forget, the mayor wrapped up by saying, "We gotta have a change of attitude." I'm gonna paraphrase. You correct me when we gotta have a change of attitude. We're not here to save the Air Force Base. We're here to support the Air Force Base. We're here to support the military. We're here to support national security, which is exactly the right message. Because, this is all good for Grand Forks, and having, a couple of senators on the right committees is helpful because you've got a better line. But remember, the purpose of the Grand Forks Air Force Base, whether we're the senators or we're on relevant committees or not, the value of this base doesn't change. Place matters. That, I always call it a big slab of concrete. Whenever I talk to combatant commanders or chiefs or secretaries, I always refer to this big slab of cement, because there's still a big Air Force base out there. Even with all of this going on, there's still a big Air Force base out there with big buildings. And so we're the storytellers, but the folks in Grand Forks are the ones that give us something to
Yeah, and it's
brag about.
also, as Bolshinsky would probably say, it's going to where the puck's going.
Yeah.
We're going where the puck's going, guys.
Why would he say that?
I don't know, but it seems like a wise, but it's really true. There's so many people hanging on to legacy missions, or trying to hang on to a legacy mission, or pursuing a legacy mission.
Yeah.
We're going to where the puck's going. That's the best. I mean, that's why I point out all 5 of these, because they're all working together to go where our military needs to go. And the plan we're talking about today was not the plan 2 years ago, or even a year ago, or even less than a year ago. This has changed, and in part because of, they want to move some money around, they have to make some commitments, and in part because these guys come up with great ideas, and then Kevin and I work to follow them up and try to make them happen.
The other advantage I'd say, Scott, one of the things that John and I both have, because we're in the skiff so often, because we're meeting with the brass so often, is we know where the puck is going. You're exactly right. And we know what the assets are here. And so we may learn a little sooner than some of our colleagues about what might be coming. And that allows us to position and prepare. Yeah.
All right, guys,
Thanks.
thanks. Now you gotta hear from, we've been talking about Borsinski so much, he's gonna have a lot to tell you.